Who you got in your tier 2?
Yeah, I've got 5 players in this second tier. So it covers running backs 4 through 8. I'll read the names: Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, Kyren Williams, Jahmyr Gibbs, Isiah Pacheco, and my tier, again, long, just for you, Daniel, is a really strong running back option, a top 20 player overall. Heck, wouldn't surprise me if all these guys are going in the first 15 or 18 picks of your draft. Again, I think you could have made a smaller tier within this tier of JT and Saquon Barkley, but I want to talk about Jonathan Taylor. Remember, this time last year, 2 years ago, we were talking about Jonathan Taylor as the consensus number 1 overall player in fantasy football. Obviously, last year was a cluster, right? I can't swear on this show. So it was still a cluster. I forgot. New season, new studio, same rules as it pertains to being a family company here. JT had a cluster situation last year. He misses the first 4 games, PUP, contract. This year, things are looking better. Now, Jonathan Taylor came on strong down the stretch last year. In his last 5 games, he had 6 total touchdowns. He was very effective as in a runner in 3 out of those 5 games. We started to feel like we saw the Jonathan Taylor that we were accustomed to in the years prior to that, and the Colts offense kind of felt like it once again ran through Jonathan Taylor. The big question mark I have for JT this season is fairly straightforward. Jonathan Taylor last year without Anthony Richardson, because remember, they did not overlap at all. Has 2 factors that I'm very mindful of. One is the fact that I will continue to contend that Anthony Richardson, one of the breakout players in fantasy football this season, is amongst the best short yardage options of any player, regardless of position, in the NFL.
Agreed.
Josh Allen may still be the best. Anthony Richardson, not that far off. Jalen Hurts also in that conversation. Is he going to continue to see as much goal line work as he did in that very small sample size last season? Moreover, how involved will Jonathan Taylor be as a pass catcher this year? He is an excellent pass catcher. He has shown in the past he's a terrific receiver. The question, though, is will the volume of targets be there for him like it would be if it were a different quarterback he was playing next to? Just go look at some of the most mobile quarterbacks in the NFL. Not all of them, but a lot of them tend not to throw the football to their backs as much. Those plays are kind of substituted by quarterback runs. Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, amongst the kind of obvious names to mention when we're talking about that statistic specifically. And JT last year had 74% of his fantasy points via rushing attempts. That was the 6th highest amongst running backs last year. So he was not getting a lot of his damage done through the air. That being said, way too many good signs. I'm very optimistic about this offense. I think if you listen to the Fantasy Focus during the offseason, you know that already. And the talent play here is just too good to ignore a player not even into the prime of his career in what could be a great offense again.
Yeah, a healthy Jonathan Taylor, which doesn't hurt either, and a healthy Anthony Richardson. I think the concern for people might be, well, Anthony Richardson, they're not going to run him as much, and then so they know it's a run play, and they're going to focus on Jonathan Taylor. And it's going to be much more divided out, teased out in terms of what Anthony Richardson can do. And I'm here to tell you that is not the plan. Yeah. And I think that fact that he can be a threat is going to create opportunities for Jonathan Taylor. I think, to your point, Field, you're going to see the offense really start to look like what I think we thought it could blossom into by late last year. Anthony Richardson was out by week 5 or 6. So I think what we could have seen towards the end of last year is what we're going to start to see from the jump.
Yeah, I don't think the offensive line's quite as good. But 2 years ago, Shane Steichen, now the Colts head coach, and de facto play caller, offensive coordinator as well, along with Jim Bob Cooter, ran the Philadelphia offense. Mm-hmm. And we saw Miles Sanders go nuts. I mean, insane, right? He was like second in the NFL in rushing. Better offensive line back then. But I think you could see a similar situation for Jonathan Taylor. Yep. He may not have 65 catches this year, but if he has 35 catches and runs for 1,500 yards and 12 touchdowns, he will be a top 5 fantasy running back this season. Excellent, excellent player. Everything, once again, aligned. Second time I've said that for a player. It's aligned for JT this year.
I actually have a question not on JT because that makes sense, and he's easily in my tier 2. There's one guy in this list that I have in my tier 3, and I have someone else in my tier 2.
Okay.
So my question is, you are quite bullish on Isiah Pacheco jumping up into this tier 2. What is it that you like about him this year in Kansas City? Because my concern is, I know they didn't add anybody, but it feels like there was like this is an addition by addition. They added 2 pass catchers. They want to get Patrick Mahomes to be able to have a better season this year. Understanding they didn't add anyone at the running back spot, why do you think that you are more bullish on him?
First of all, awesome player, right? I mean, this guy is the Chiefs just freaking crush it in the draft recently. He was so good last year as a rusher. He was just such an effective player for them in that regard of the game, but also had a much more expanded passing game role this season. And you're right. There are more pass catchers this year than there were last season that we trust going into the year, right? Beyond Travis Kelce, you got Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy also in the mix. Jerick McKinnon, as their primary pass-catching running back over the past few years, has seen a very fruitful role. And even when they had a bunch of guys cooking, right? Like last season was not the only year that Jerick McKinnon was effective. As a matter of fact, 2 years ago, when Patrick Mahomes was the number one passer in terms of yards in the NFL after trading away Tyreek Hill somehow, it was Jerick McKinnon who had that game of like that streak of 8 straight games with a receiving touchdown. The passing role should be awesome for Isiah Pacheco, and maybe having those additional threats around Patrick Mahomes creates even more light boxes. Last year, teams probably felt like they could compress the box and just sort of dare the Chiefs to run the football. They did. Throw the football, and I think that like Isiah Pacheco is in a better ecosystem this year for big plays plus receiving opportunities. I'm in. I've got him as RB8. So I think Isiah Pacheco, who I will never spell his first name right. He's the only Isaiah I know. Isiah. I'm in.
I'll tell you what.
Okay.
You mentioned this. I looked it up last night because I was curious. When you look at defenders in the box, he was top 5 in fantasy points per touch when you have 8 or more defenders in the box.
He's already good in that regard, right? Because he runs angry. The guy is pissed off at the grass every time he has the football.
It's the way he runs.
It is the way he runs. Yeah. So the idea that, like, hey, if you load guys at the box, he was one of the most efficient running backs in the NFL last year.
He had a great offensive line too, right? I mean, that's a mash unit up.
So maybe you add to this point, like getting to where you're at. You add a couple of pass catchers. Maybe you have some lighter boxes. Okay, this is only going to make things easier, ideally, for a guy that runs as well as this.
Yeah.
The one in this tier for me that gives me a little bit of concern is Kyren Williams. Mostly injury. Just really, can he stay on the field? We saw last year. Remember, there was a point in time where he was on the field for like 99% of the offensive snaps, and clearly that is too much. Again, I will be a running back apologist forever and ever plus a day, and this is exactly why. Because a player like that gets utilized so much that their injury exposure is high, and then he's not the biggest build running back, right? So he's
small tank.
Exactly. Okay. So, but that exposes him to injury risk, which we saw have an effect. Now, we know that they drafted Blake Corum.
Yeah.
And so my personal draft strategy, we were doing all these mocks, is if I landed Kyren Williams, because I do think he will be amazing, and I know they have big plans for him. Sean McVay loves him. But I want to have Blake Corum because there might not be the ability to have Kyren Williams carrying the load that he might start out with.
Yeah, Corum, one of the most important insurance policy running backs
we'll talk about
fantasy this season.
Yeah.
Definitely going to make one of these.
You mentioned Sean McVay, Kyren Williams. I'm not saying that because it's like my Lord Voldemort. Who shall not be named.
Yeah, he who must not.
Because a couple of years ago when we talked about how much Sean McVay loved Cam Akers.
Yeah, well, we know what happened.
I'm not going to say that. Except I did just say it.
Yeah.